My name is Anshul. I'm the founder of CamQ12. Most of you have heard from me before. Some of you have not. So quick background. I started teaching coding in India to young kids such as yourselves back in 2010. Back then, I myself was an MIT student studying computer science there. And that's actually where I met the speaker who is speaking to you today. More on that later. Since then, I have gone on to do various work in the Silicon Valley as a software developer, but also came back to my passion of teaching coding to all of you and building a global platform, building a school of the future. And CamQ12 is a school of the future, teaching coding and other 21st century skills. Back then, I used to do it in physical school campuses, in computer labs. It was offline. So my team and I would do it in the lab. And today, we've built our own school online, which connects you, students who can be anywhere in the world, with teachers who are really inspiring teachers who themselves are coders and makers and doers. And those teachers can be anywhere in the world as well. So CamQ12 is a global online school. Today we teach coding to students all around the world. And in the coming months, you're going to see us adding many other categories that a school that you fall in love with should have. And our goal is to make learning really fun. It's to make learning really relevant and teach you skills that you will need in the world that you live in. Rather than the traditional school system, which focuses much more on theoretical knowledge, we are all about applied knowledge. And coding is one of those skills that, whether you become a coder or engineer or not, I think has universal appeal and it helps everybody. It's an equalizer because it shows you that it doesn't matter what you do, where you come from, what background you have, but you have a chance to create, to solve problems, to build applications, websites, and more. And today we'll talk about one person's journey through great colleges in the world's best institutions, the world's best tech companies. But ultimately, he came back to what he loves and his passion for coding and building his own enterprises, his own companies. And you're going to get to hear from him about why he did that and what is this power of coding that enables you to, in your life, be able to do whatever it is that you want and not be so dependent on those companies and those colleges, but to make a great life for yourself and your families and to change the world through the power of code. That's what CamQ12 celebrates. Back in the day, we used to take students to field trips to Google, Microsoft, Apple campuses. Now it's a little harder to do that because we're on lockdown and also we're a very global community. So hard to take you guys from different countries to those companies. And so we thought, why not bring people who have worked at those companies and done those things to you? That was the beginnings of CamQ12 Talks. And for the last few months, we've actually celebrated this power of coding with various speakers. The very first month you heard from Nikhila, who was an AI engineer at Facebook, a computer science graduate of Harvard. The month after that, you heard from an IIT Bombay graduate who made his way from Chennai to the Silicon Valley and was working at Twitter as a machine learning engineer. And then most recently, you heard from Prachi, who was an IIT Roorkee computer science graduate who's worked at a number of big tech companies and was currently working at Microsoft. We asked you, the community, to vote on who you would want your next speaker to be. And we gave you various options. We asked if you want people from big tech companies. We asked if you wanted people who were entrepreneurs and people building things. And we asked if you want people from US universities. And there were votes for all of those. And we thought, why not get someone who has done all of those things, who has worked at the big tech companies, who has gone to a top US university as an international applicant from India to MIT, and who has, in the end, decided that the most meaningful thing for him is, in fact, to build his own products, his own companies with the power of code. And so with that segue, I want to introduce our guest speaker for today. Sinchan Banerjee is a close friend of mine from college days, and so very excited on a personal basis as well to be able to host him for this event. But I think you guys are going to love to hear his story because it is truly a moving story of how being someone who is a builder can really change your life. And Sinchan is a first-class builder, and we're very lucky to have him here for CamQ12 Talks. Keep in mind that throughout this event, if you have real-time questions, you can ask them on the mobile app. at any point in time. On my phone, I have a sheet that shows me what questions are coming in, and I am going to take Sinchan through some questions that you guys have submitted in advance. And then at the end, we'll have time to open it up to a back and forth Q&A where we will unmute you and let you ask your question in real time. So with that said, Sinchan, please unmute yourself and welcome to Camp K12. Everyone give him a round of applause for being awake at midnight in New York.
Thanks for having me, guys. Yeah, really exciting to meet all of you. There's 145 of you right now, so that's a solid number. Really excited to be here.
And we're excited to have you, Sinchan. So lots of questions came in over the week when we asked students what they wanted to ask you. What I have done, students and parents, is I've consolidated these questions into buckets or groups of types of questions, categories of questions. And broadly speaking, Sinchan, there were a lot of questions about your journey and your life. So I think we should do two kinds of questions. We should do questions about your journey, and we should also do some fun questions that people have asked about other aspects of your life and what motivates you and things like that. So I have picked a few from both categories, and I'm going to give you a question, and then we can mix things up and take it as it goes. But why don't we start by giving students a sense of your coder journey? So the very first question is, tell us about your coder journey. What was the first line of code that you wrote? When did you write that line of code, and what were you building?
That's a great question. I think, yeah, the first line of code was probably a print statement. Hello world, something of that sort. But that project, the first project I worked on, was actually a fun little game. It was like an animated game where Batman saves the day. There's like a flying plane GIF flying across the screen, and Batman would swoop in and save the day. It was pretty simple. There wasn't too much happening, but it really was the first time when I saw something come to life. And that's one of the things that really excites me, of like, you can write a few lines of code and see something happen on screen. Some behavior shows up. Batman swoops in. That's crazy. I hadn't met Batman before that, so it was exciting to see him come to life.
Were you in that time?
I was, I think, in ninth at the time. So yeah.
I was in 8th, 9th grade as well when I wrote my first line of code, and mine was it was an HTML web page with my name on it, and I felt very excited that I had a personal website. Very, very empowering.
You should be, yeah.
So let's talk about what happened after that. 9th grade is the very early days of high school. Tell us about what happened after you wrote that first line of code and built that Batman game. What kinds of things did you code during your school days? And also,
yeah, that's a great question.
How you taught yourself to do those things?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, in the beginning, after the Batman game, you have a limited set of skills, right? You know how to maybe do an animated game. You can see how a plane can move through the sky, that kind of stuff. But I think the first challenge I really faced was around 10th. I went to the Indian Institute of Cerebral Palsy in Calcutta, and I basically was volunteering there over a summer, and I was interacting with the kids there, and I saw that the software that they were using, the way they were interacting with computers, was really, really bad. It was super slow. So, instead of having a faster way to type words, for example, you had to wait for every single letter of the keyboard to be highlighted. And when the right keyboard letter would show up, you would press a button and then that would get clicked. So extremely slow. And it was one of those moments where I was like, hey, I now know enough coding to try to do something for these guys. There has to be a faster way to build, or to basically even let them type things. These kids had already faced a lot of setbacks from society and the world. They couldn't go to normal schools. They couldn't do normal things a lot of the times. And seeing that in the world of technology, which often brings people together, puts people on the same playing field, even there, they didn't have the right resources. I decided, hey, we should try to do something. And I think that's where that second part of the question comes in, where, I didn't have all the skills right then, but that's the beauty of computer science, especially right now, where there's so much amazing content online. Wherever I got stuck each time, I would Google it. I would go on Stack Overflow. I'd take a mini course online, a tutorial, and I would pick something up. One of the weirdest things was like, okay, when you want to build, assistive interfaces for children with physical disabilities, one of the biggest things is like, okay, you need to take control of the mouse, so that if their motion is getting too spastic, you need to be able to take control of it and do something with it. And so I remember Java, there's a robot class, which lets you take control of the mouse. And I didn't know about it, but enough searching on the internet got me there. And as I talked to more people, as I learned more, I was able to actually build something for them that sped it up way faster. And so instead of linear time, we were going at a way faster pace, at typing things out. Then I started making games for them. I started making like math lessons for them, all with software. And these were things that, before trying them out, I never thought I could do. It's that's really where that empowerment comes in. Well, I think Anshul, you're muted, I think.
Okay, I'll say it again. Sorry, I was on mute. I was asking if you can offer some context on so that the attendees here can empathize with what these kids' lives were like. Like, talk a little bit about what it means to have cerebral palsy, and what was their setback, and how did the power of software and coding here transform their lives, just so that they know whether or not they know about the condition, they can now follow along in your the transformation story that you enabled for them.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, so cerebral palsy is basically a class of disabilities, essentially, where oftentimes during birth, you get injured or something like that happens, and you end up with an array of usually spastic disabilities. So a lot of the common, disabilities that you see are that, okay, it's hard for you to keep your hands still. So you'll be shaking a lot. It'll be hard to control your motion that much. And so that's why, these kids, if they were trying to hold a mouse, it's hard to point at anything and click it because it's shaking all the time. And that's why they had to initially go for an interface, which was just like, okay, all you have to do is just slap the keyboard. That's it. You don't need to do anything else. And so that was the biggest challenge. They can't, pick up a pencil. They can't write, because especially in India at the time, there wasn't that much infrastructure for these kids. Like normal schools, if they go to them, they'll be kicked out. They have to go to these special schools for children with cerebral palsy. A lot of these children, they're kind of basically doomed when they're born that, oh, okay, you will never end up doing anything. You can't get a job, you can't work anywhere, you can't build anything. But the institute where I was working, they were trying to change that. They were trying to say, hey, kids, you might have some disabilities, but there's always a way for you to do things and build stuff. And even in that school, they had a program where these kids would try to make cards, like Christmas cards, and sell them and things of that nature. So,
And Sinchan, what
yeah.
grade were you in when you built this software for the institute and gave it to the students with cerebral palsy?
Yeah, I was in 10th at the time.
So guys, this is 1 year. This is 1 year after he started coding. He started coding in 9th grade. 10th grade, he is building software for social good, is how I'm interpreting this, which is actually kudos to you, Sinchan, because I think most people, when they're learning coding, don't realize that the same thing that they're learning to make games can also help improve the lives of other people. Like, I remember my own story. I think I was making games for like 3 years before I started doing things for other people that would help them in their life. And so 1 year after you started coding, 10th grade, you were giving software to improve the lives of victims of cerebral palsy, to improve their hand-eye coordination. And then I remember hearing from you in our college days that you even built a nonprofit organization. Was it that related to this? Was that around this idea? Talk a bit about that, because it's a project you did in the school days, and I really want these kids and the parents that are here to, what I want them to really take away from your story, because what I've taken away from your story is that you're never too young to try to apply your skills to solve real world problems. and try to make the world a better place. And you started that at a very young age, giving back to the community with your technology skills. So I want people to understand what you did, because you didn't stop just by giving them the software. You did more. So talk about the nonprofit that you set up during these days as well.
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, at the time, basically assistive technologies were extremely expensive for kids with cerebral palsy, especially in India. It's just unaffordable at the time. Nowadays, there's a lot of new fancy technology that comes at a more affordable cost. But at the time, it was very expensive. These kids didn't have that much to be able to afford these kinds of things. And there were a lot of other institutions across the country and across the world who needed similar kinds of projects. And I realized that, okay, I made this cool thing, but it's just by itself, it's not going to keep going. And so let's build an organization around it and start trying to get this to other people, whoever can use it. And I think, what you brought up about the games, it's in the beginning, I think it really comes down to, when do you see a need in the world that you feel like, hey, I can actually do this. It could be a game where it's like, I don't know why there's no game like this, and why isn't it like that? And for me, it was that, okay, these kids should have something better. This is not acceptable. And hey, I should be able to make something like that. And once I got through the first pass, I was like, oh, okay, I actually feel like I can do this. And then you build confidence over and over until you feel unstoppable in the software world. And I think all of you kids can get there very quickly. And that's the beauty of software in general. If you are working in some other industries, it's harder to get the resources to do that. But with software, you can learn, you can jump in and do it. Like for me, I was able to go from Batman all the way to helping these kids, starting a nonprofit organization, and helping a lot of people through it. It is because of that where I am today, 100%. And I think that's the biggest thing. If you see a need somewhere and you're like, oh, this is not acceptable, why would people do this way? Try to fix it. No one else is going to do it. Someone has to. And so try. And as soon as you try, you'll start learning, oh, wow, I can actually do this. I can build all of these different things. And once you have that confidence, you can go build anything in the world, which is exciting.
I think it's a very, very important point that you have made. Many times, I think kids are among the most creative people in the world, right? They
Yeah.
have ideas that adults don't have. And one of the things that I found is, kids tell themselves that I don't know how to do this, like I don't know how to do the full thing, so I'm not going to do it, because in their minds they can't connect the dot between the start and the end. And what you're saying is, it doesn't matter if you don't know exactly how you're going to make the system for helping these kids with cerebral palsy. There's a problem, you have the skills and an understanding of technology. You don't have to wait for someone else to solve it, because they won't. You can take the first step, and the second step, third step, fourth step will reveal itself, is kind of what I'm hearing from you. And also that you will learn along the way, because I know the journey you're talking about, where you may not know that there's a robot class in the Java, uh, in Java, and you like look on the internet, you will try different things, and you'll see, oh wow, I can really take control of the screen, I can help people out, and you'll discover things as you go that you didn't know before. So the dots kind of connect on a rolling basis as you are moving forward. Sinchan, this is a good segue into the next question, which actually was the most popular question, because it's about MIT. It's about your journey as a young coder builder, and how you as an international applicant got into MIT. Because I think everyone here knows that, first of all, MIT is a very hard college to get into. And second of all, it is even harder as an international student to get into MIT than it is to be a US citizen and then get into MIT. So you have achieved this feat and got into great colleges as an Indian applicant. Talk about that journey. There are a lot of specific questions people have asked, but before I ask you those questions, I'm going to let you talk about it in a general sort of way. So how did you end up getting to MIT?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think, especially as an international student, the biggest thing I saw was that to get into these colleges, you really need to show a deep passion in something. You have to focus on one thing at least. And go all the way with it, right? And I think there's traditional metrics, go all the way to the point where you win an award on some, state, national, international level. But I think the key thing is always you have to show these colleges that you didn't just try to do XYZ, you did it to the fullest form. You showed how intense you can be about it, essentially. For me, it was this cerebral palsy project where I went all the way. I built the software, I started a nonprofit, and I kept going. I competed in international science fairs, I won in some of them, and it became something where I really devoted myself to it, and it was my passion. I really wanted this thing that I was making to be there in the world, and the steps I took to do that basically helped me get into MIT at the same time. So I'd say that would be the highest level thing. A lot of colleges, they'll say, oh, good grades, things of that nature, but being able to learn a skill like coding and showing the world how far you can go with that is really exciting.
So let's just ask some of the specific questions here. And by the way, some of you guys are messaging, what is the full form of MIT? What MIT are we talking about? We're talking about the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Boston and in the United States. And it's an engineering college known for, they have a really good computer science program and really good technology program in general, and has graduated some of the greatest engineers and builders that so that's MIT, and it's a very difficult college to get into, and that's why we're asking Sinchan about how he navigated that process, especially given how competitive it is to apply as an Indian applicant and to differentiate yourself. What I'm hearing from Sinchan is that good grades is not enough, because many people have good grades, believe it or not. And SAT scores is not enough, because many people manage to get good SAT scores. Some of you guys asked in the messages beforehand over Google, the Google form we submitted. So the question for Sinchan is, hey, if I have full SAT score and like completely A grade report card, will I get into MIT? And that's a question. And if not, what more will I need to do? And Sinchan has started to answer it already, but Sinchan, why don't you address the question directly about grades and SAT?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I think there's a ton of people with those perfect SAT scores and the perfect grades. That's the sad part. And I think the differentiator, especially in India, where everyone is usually just focused on the grades, is that extra something, right? What differentiates you from everyone who has perfect SAT scores? And as I mentioned, it's something where you can take some passion. It could be photography, it could be coding, it could be design, making games, whatever it is, but taking it all the way. I've seen kids who say, oh, okay, I did this one thing, I learned a little bit of this, but that's not enough. You have to really show people that this was not just something you did over a weekend. You made this your passion. You went all the way, if that makes sense.
So absolutely, it does. You've echoed that statement twice now, which is that you have to go beyond your academics. And guys, this is one important way in which admissions in the US universities is different from admissions in the IIT system in India, for example. So last month, you heard from Prachi, who is a graduate of IIT Roorkee, computer science, and she talked to you about the rank system and how you have to, she had spent some time in Kota and preparing and things like that. That's kind of the system that exists in India. I think that system will change, by the way, but it'll change slowly. In the US, that system is already, it's beyond that. And the system there looks at the holistic personality and asks the question, what is my, what will this student of MIT do if we admit them to MIT in their life that makes us as a university proud to have them be an MIT alumnus? That's kind of how they think about it. And grades are not that defining characteristic in the world we live in today. Because the world we live in today, anybody can build anything. A 10th grader named Sinchan Banerjee in school built a product to change the lives of kids with cerebral palsy, built a nonprofit organization around that. And that's something they saw. And he did it with the power of coding. Now, you don't have to do it with the power of coding. I think what Sinchan is saying is that take whatever you love. It could be technology, it could be coding, and go all the way with it. And so some of you asked over Google Forms that are extracurriculars required. I think that there is no check the box kind of approach to getting into these colleges. If you do extracurriculars, doesn't that alone won't get you admitted. If you do something in the extracurricular space beyond your academics and excel at it. So in Sinchan's case, building a product to change lives, applying his interest and hobby in building games to actually building games for people who benefited from it and created social welfare. That is something that very few kids do. And he was probably competing with a number of applicants from India who had really good grades, who had all of those things. And he also had good grades. I think that is a requirement. But one thing that he did is he made time in his school days. Keep in mind, he made time in his school days when everyone is so busy. In fact, one of the questions that everyone has asked on Google Forms is, how did you make time, Sinchan? And how did parents ask this all the time to me and to the entire Camp Kettle community, which is, hey, we know that coding is important. We know that following your passion is important, but the world is almost giving you obstacle after obstacle, telling you have to study for this exam and that exam. How did you make time, Sinchan, in school days for the things that you really loved while doing these extracurricular pursuits and building, writing software? And any advice you have for parents on how to create space and time for kids to pursue these things while still doing well in school?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, for most of these things, there's a few approaches to it. You can do the classic, okay, I'm going to do a little bit every day. That adds up. Okay, half an hour every day. It's not going to take away that much time from your studies. That adds up. But there's also the dedicate yourself and keep at it till it's done, right? Especially when you really go into it. I don't know about you guys out there, but for me, when I've started a coding project and I'm in it, I'm almost there. I see the end line. I can't stop. I have to get it done, and it's really that joy of, okay, I have to see it come to life. If all I'm seeing are errors, it's not going to work. I need to see it working. I need to see it fully functional, and that's the magic, right? So that's another angle. Instead of doing half an hour every day, you dedicate one evening where you're, okay, this is my coding project day. I'm going to get this done and I'm going to go at it till it's done. I'm going to keep going. And so back in high school, I often had to, spend a lot of time every day coding, and it was fun. It keeps you going. And I think that's one of the biggest things. It's not just a fun thing on the side that's distracting you from studies. These are things that, not only energize you because you're excited, you're seeing something come to life, which is really magical. On top of that, you are actually learning a very unique set of skills. Coding is not what I would say it's not a traditional game in the sense that, okay, you're only learning a very specialized skill set, right? You end up learning a generalized sense of puzzle solving in a way. Like coding itself is, okay, how do I make this work? And that skill set will come in handy in studies, whether it's math, science, anywhere. Even if it's something, even in daily life. I was assembling a closet the other day, and I realized that, hey, I have learned so many interesting puzzle solving skills because I'm a coder. And it wasn't necessarily the math or the science that got me there, but rather, how do I figure this out? It was that coding angle that really got me there.
And parents and students, keep in mind that even when so the stories of Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg. These guys were students of Sinchan's age when they started coding. So I think 9th grade, 10th grade, Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg were also coding. And these guys got into Harvard before they dropped out of Harvard, right? Bill Gates, he built Microsoft. He got into Harvard before he dropped out of Harvard. Mark Zuckerberg got into Harvard before he dropped out of Harvard. And their stories are on Netflix. Like you can watch Bill Gates' story on Netflix. You can read about Mark Zuckerberg. There are tons of biographies about them. They were coding on a daily basis. Every day they were coding, and they got good grades in addition to that, not instead of that. So there are enough role models and examples in your life of people who find time to pursue the things they love and the things that make a difference in the world while studying. And it has, Sinchan's totally right. Once you start, it becomes addicting. And Sinchan, did you pull any all-nighters during school days to like code something because you couldn't stop, like that feeling of
I did, yeah, 100%.
and I did
Yeah,
too, more than one. Like in school days, there were many nights where you are like at 11 p.m. looking at the clock, you're coding something that is not for a school assignment. It's not for a school assignment. You're coding something because you have, in Sinchan's case, an organization that is waiting for you to build a solution to this real world problem. In my case, in the early days, it was just random things I built for my family, for my mom, for my dad, for my teachers, just random things like that. And you get started and you can't stop. I completely echo with that sentiment Sinchan has given, that you start coding, you can't stop. And then you realize it's 6 a.m. And it's time to go to school. And so you'll have those nights that'll happen, and you shouldn't have them every day because that's not good for you. But you'll have those nights, and it is energizing. Like you don't feel tired, you don't feel sleepy. My own story is that I took my laptop to my interviews. I don't know if you did that, Sinchan, but when I was interviewing with colleges, I took my laptop with all my coding projects. And when people would ask, like, tell us about the things you do outside of class, I would say, can I show you rather than tell you? And that was a very fun moment because I had my portfolio. I would just run. I also used to do a lot of Java. I would just show them my various Java games and applications I'd built. And it really changes the dynamic when people realize that you're not just someone who is running the rat race of getting grades and all of that stuff. You're someone who has a vision for their life and wants to do something and actually makes time for it. So I think the point, Sincha, thank you for making that point clear. I think it's very important for parents in this generation to hear that from kids, that there are these things that kids do which might in the short term seem that they don't fit in to the picture, but excelling in those things has very nice positive side effects, and coding is one of those things that has positive side effects. It is addicting and it's fun and it's like a game, but it's one of those games that helps you in life. It's an addiction that helps you in life. Let's continue because there is another part of your journey which is very interesting, Sinchan. So at MIT and beyond MIT, you got jobs at the best tech companies in the world. And you worked at Google for some time, you worked at Microsoft at some time, and had offers from many others. Kids want to know, why did you ultimately decide to leave those companies? As in, why are you not at those companies today? And why, is there anything better than those companies? Is the question. And so talk to us about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's definitely joy and wonder in those companies. It's a great job, good salary, all of that. But I think the main thing that inspired me to jump ship and start my own companies was that, first of all, I had gotten a taste of what it feels like to go from 0 to 100 with my own products, whether it was a game when I first started coding, whether it was my projects for Cerebral Palsy, all of these things, seeing it come to life from 0 to 60 is a very extraordinary experience. When you work at Google or Microsoft, you work on a small piece of a very big product, versus when you build your own thing, you get to work on the whole thing, the big piece of the small thing initially, and then it grows into a very big project. And being able to have that power to be able to see something come to life from scratch all the way to something big was something that has always inspired me. And that was one of the main inspirations. I realized I could stay at these companies and, work on things that had already been built for the most part. We could release new features, new products, but they're not the same if you don't go out there, see your own need, find something that someone wants, and then builds it for them. That's a very wonderful experience. I think in the business world they call it product market fit, but for me, it's always been hey, I can make something come to life. And if someone wants that, someone needs that, then there's something very beautiful to it. And I'd rather do that than be at, a company that's just working on the same product again and again. So
I think what Sinchan is saying is once you've tasted it, the empowerment that you have the skills that you need to in this lifetime make something really big, then all of a sudden you will find that those technology companies don't feel like the pinnacle anymore. They might just be a stepping stone. And really, what we try to focus on at Camp K12 as well is giving you that skill and giving you that empowerment that enables you to feel what Sinchan has felt and what I have felt in my own life, because we've both gone through the same process, and believe it or not, many of our classmates have also. You go to Google thinking it's going to be this and that, but then you realize that hey, it's a great institution, it's making a difference in the world, but you have the skills within you to build your own Google, and then you go on the quest for that. And on that question of quest, I'm reading the questions kids are submitting via the mobile app, and I want to switch gears a bit and ask Samay Devani, if you're here. Samay, if you're here, I'd like you to ask your question. I think it's relevant. Samay, I see you. We'll have to unmute you. Go ahead. I've given you permission to unmute. And if, yeah, there you are. So Samay, you asked about motivation and inspiration. So go ahead and ask Sinchan directly your question.
Yes, sir. Where did you get your motivation from? Like, what motivated you to get here?
that's a great question. That's a great question. Yeah, it's I think in terms of motivation, there was always a few things, right? I think it's especially when you want to go longer term. I've been doing this for a long time now. It's never just one thing. It's a set of motivations. Initially, it was just the joy of seeing something come to life, being able to code something, make it real. Then when I was at MIT, there was a lot of seeing my peers go on to build big companies, right? So Anshul mentioned Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, but there's so many of our friends that I've seen successfully build large companies. And there was a joy to that as well. Seeing, just like there was joy to seeing something small as a product come to life, seeing a company grow and be something real is really exciting. And that's something for parents out there as well. All of this, the joy of it is that you can really chase your passions. But on top of that, especially in India now, it is becoming a world where it's not that you can only earn money by going into Google or Microsoft, right? A lot of our friends this year itself, two groups of friends have had huge exits in the billions of dollars. And seeing that happen to people makes you really feel like, hey, I can do it too. And that is a strong motivation to be able to realize that, hey, we can make something and make it into something big that gives a lot of people jobs, gives a lot of people hope and a lot of stuff. So yeah, I guess those two things were big inspirers. And yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's for the everyday things, it's always the joys you get from building things, right? Just like Anshul probably has so much fun building Camp K12, learning new things, building new things for people so that, we can all have fun at the end of the day.
Thank you, Sinchan. I have one more question I want to field from the crowd here. So, Sulaiman, I've just asked you to unmute yourself. You asked about what Sinchan built at MIT, the project.
Yeah,
So,
all some of the projects he made at MIT.
so Sinchan, you've told us about projects you made in school. Tell us about the kinds of things you built at MIT.
That's a great question. I think one of the biggest ones was this thing called Books Picker. So when we first got into MIT, it was actually really hard to figure out what books you needed for what classes. It's a pretty simple problem, but there were so many classes and so many books. You would have to go to the bookstore, you would have to go to the registrar, do a lot of things. And so me and a couple of friends of ours, we decided, hey, let's create a website which will let you find your books and buy them on the website itself, so that You don't have to worry about, oh, what books do you need for what classes? We'll figure it all out for you. And so we did it. The logo was that of a pirate, and so it was a fun book selling website, and we actually started earning money from it. And eventually, we forced MIT to actually make their book finding process a lot easier, which was our greatest success, I would argue. So now if you go to MIT, it should be a lot easier for you.
You know, what's interesting about books is Amazon started with books. Amazon started as a book store. Flipkart, even Flipkart started as an online bookstore. And so I do remember was it freshman year, first year of MIT? Did you build this?
Yeah.
I remember very early on. So guys, college life is busy, by the way. The same challenges we're talking about in school days, where how do you find time to do projects, exists at MIT. It's well known to be a very difficult college. Your homework problem sets are very difficult at MIT compared to Harvard and compared to a lot of other colleges. And so it's not easy to make time. And I think what you can hear from Sinchan is, even when he got into MIT, even when he went to MIT, this books picker idea was not part of the curriculum. It was not part of MIT's curriculum. He continued to code projects for fun, to make life better for others. And Bookspicker had, we as classmates were using his product. So it's a very cool power that you have when you code to build things that others use. And he kept that going through all through MIT. Sinchan, another question we have received from students is, what is your favorite personal project that you have built now, even beyond MIT, like since the last decade, let's say? Like, what's a project you're really proud of, or something you're excited to share with these kids that you've built?
That's a great question. I built once upon a time, I had this company called Destiny, and it was a matchmaking company. So a very unusual kind of company. And that was one of the most amazing things that I've worked on, because a lot of the other things, they were tactical problems, right? So, okay, how do you get books to kids? There was a lot of other things. Okay, how do you solve this business problem? These businesses are not able to do XYZ. How do we fix that? With matchmaking, I was able to tackle something way more complex, which is, okay, how do you get strangers to get to know about each other, to learn about each other without ever meeting? And that is one of the most complex projects to work on. And I think, there was something amazing about it because of its complexity. And I think that's one of the things where, as Anshul mentioned earlier, we all face that. Even now, when I'm starting a new product, I don't know how to get to the finish line. It's not there. No one's going to tell you. When I was growing up, I was like, oh, I'm going to become Bill Gates. I'm going to get to XYZ, but you really don't know how to get there. All you know is, I know that first step. And for matchmaking, the first step was, okay, I know this stuff about happiness, how people understand each other. Let's start there. And as I kept on going and learning more and more, I just learned so much about life and products, how people get to know each other. And seeing that journey was the most amazing thing, more than the beginning or the end. Just being able to build that product, learn so much in the middle. Going back to the motivation question, I think oftentimes you learn so much, that might not sound that interesting if you're in, 9th or 10th at the time, but some things are just interesting and they're really fun to go through and, learn about over time. And once you become the master of something like that, it's something exciting. So.
I would love to open it up, Sinchan, to the audience that's here as well. So kids, I can see some of you have raised your hand. I'd like to give you guys a chance to ask a question. So we're going to start with Pranav Sogali, very nicely raising his hand. I can see you. Pranav, we're going to unmute you and would love for you to ask a question. 1 second. All right.
Sir, I would like to ask, how was the journey in Google?
I don't know if you heard the question, Sinchan. How was your journey in Google?
Yeah, that's a great question. So are you talking about more of the journey inside Google or to Google? I guess that's I can touch on both. So yeah, I got into Google from MIT. So, they have a lot of recruitment processes. You interview, you answer a lot of interesting questions, a lot of puzzle-like questions that they ask, and you try to show them a lot like a college application, you know, who you are and what makes you different. And a lot of the stories actually that I was working on at MIT from before, they came in handy and they got me all the way to Google. Google itself is a great place. I worked at the Mountain View headquarters, so it's the global headquarters for Google, and yeah, it was a really fun place. They have bicycles that you can ride around. They have a bunch of restaurants with free food, so you can go get cookies and brownies all the time. Everyone gains about a few kgs every time they join Google. So yeah, it's a fun time.
Great. I can see that Venu has a question. Venu, I'd love to give you a chance to ask it. Let me unmute you. One moment. All right, go ahead.
How you become MIT?
Your question is how did he go to MIT? Is that the question, Venu? How did he go to MIT?
Yeah.
So I think because he has already touched on this topic, what we're going to do is, Venu, we're going to make the recording available to you afterwards. This was the question that he answered in the beginning. And I would summarize it by saying he got to MIT by taking the things he loved to do, and he did them really well. And that's what we were talking about earlier, which is you have to go to these US universities, you have to show that you're not just someone who gets good grades, but you're someone who builds, who solves problems, who's going to make the university proud. So we'll make the recording available so you can watch it in greater detail. Let's go to Aditya. Aditya, let me unmute you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Go ahead, Aditya.
Hello, sir. So I wanted to ask that to go such universities, you also need to do a research work. And as being a coder, how did you do research work in fields?
That's a great question. Yeah, I actually did do research as well. When I was in high school, in like I think, yeah, 10th, 11th, I think then. I worked for this university, Rice University, and I worked for their supercomputing research group. And so there's in a lot of these universities, you'll have research groups. In India, there's relatively less research going on often, but I'm sure you can find a spot. And even if you don't, I don't think research is 100% requirement. No one's going to look at your application and see, oh, did you do research or not? If you haven't, then no. Research is just one way to show that passion that, okay, I was interested about this, so I started doing research. I spent a lot of time looking into this subject, learning about it, right? And if you do that in any other way, right? Build your own application, right? Build your own app. That is research in your own form, right? You don't have to be under a large research institution. If anything, it's more impressive because if you go to a university, then someone's telling you what to do. Here, you carve your own path. So
yeah, Aditya, it's not a requirement to get into MIT that you have to do research. And I don't think it's a requirement to get into Harvard, Stanford, any of those colleges that you have to do research. And I think Sinchan's point is, if you do research, and if you want that to be your thing, if you love it, if you really love it, then don't just do research just to check the box. Do research because you want to discover something new. You want to publish a paper. You want to really go all in. The same way Sinchan went all in on his coding projects. And it is not a requirement. The main point I would like to make today is when you consider your life and college admissions as well as life beyond, there is not a checklist. There isn't a checklist. A lot of people have tried to find the checklist to success and to admissions and things like that. Unfortunately, that is not the strategy that you should use as parents or as kids. You should try to find things that you're good at and that you love, because if you find that, then chances are you will be distinguished at it relative to everyone else in India, and you will be recognized for it as well, and the rest will take care of itself. So do what you love and do it really well. If you're going to do things that you don't love, you're not going to do really well. If you're going to do things that you're really not good at but you love, you still probably may not be distinguished. But if you find things that you love and that you can go all in on, you will likely become the best in your community, then your state, then your country, etc. at those things. I saw, I think Uma Maheshwari Devi, you were raising your hand, and you're still raising your hand. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself so you can ask a question.
I'm Deekshita. My mother's name is Uma Maheshwari.
What's your name?
Deekshita.
Deekshita. Thank you. Go ahead.
Looking back, would you have done anything differently other than this? Anything other than this?
That's a good question.
That's it.
Yeah, would I have done anything differently? Yeah, I think there was a time when I saw the world as a checklist, like Anshul was talking about. And for me, the checklist was, hey, if I get this fancy job at Google, if I get this fancy job at Microsoft, then I'll be set. I'll be so happy. It'll all be perfect, right? And I think what I realized once I got there was that, hey, that's not the end. I actually have other things that make me even happier. So let me do that. And so I think I spent a lot of my time once upon a time looking for those checklists. And one day I realized that I can be way happier, way more successful by walking my own path. I tried out the other path, but it wasn't that fun as people said it was. So, yeah.
Yeah, great question. And thank you for the honest answer, Sinchan. I think we've all had moments in our lives where we are doing things that maybe other people ask us to do or other people want us to do. And it takes everyone a different amount of time to find their own calling and their own path. I saw a couple other people raising their hand. There was a father-son duo that was raising their hand earlier. I don't see you anymore. So oh, there you are, Avinash Kolte. Avinash, I'm gonna ask you to unmute yourself. Go ahead. Go ahead, guys.
Yeah, hi, Anshul. Anshul. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you, Anshul and Mr. Banerjee, for your time. It's very interesting session. My question is, the coding is like a part of computer science, and the education, when you go for a degree course in education, you go for a computer science. Is it possible that you go for some other stream and still you're continuing with the coding? In the context of, in my personal life, I worked at many places. I started in my own business, and I realized that practical experience is very useful when you apply that knowledge in your what is in your business. That's very effective. In a sense, like now I'm working on Excels or Words and a lot of stuff. There is a lot of manual work, and I feel like I wish I could have learned coding so I could put something in software. So the practical knowledge. And my question is, can it both the things, like go for some different kind of engineering branch and same time learning coding? That's my question.
Yeah, if I have to repeat the question back for our whole audience, my understanding is you're asking, can you do coding and be good at coding without studying it, without studying computer science necessarily, and without following the academic path of computer science, right? Sinchan, I'll let you answer that first, and then I have some thoughts on it too.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think 100%, especially as we see computer science becoming a part of the world more and more. Every occupation, everyone's using computers all the time. And I think that's why, especially, it's exciting if you can learn how to code in the beginning. As we mentioned earlier, you don't need that much to get started. As soon as you have that foundation, if you're, let's say, you studied mechanical engineering and you're working on a pump, let's say, and you're trying to figure it out, you need to run a lot of calculations, you're stuck. Excel is being very frustrating. Then you can whip out your coding skills. If you get stuck somewhere, you can look it up online because you have that foundation there. And I think 100%, no matter what you're doing, whether it's some other type of engineering, whether it's you being a doctor, artist, whatever it is, coding has become one of those things that can come in handy more and more, no matter what you're doing.
Sinchan, I'm going to add on to your response, and I'm going to use an analogy. So, Mr. Avinash, do you play any sport?
Yeah.
Which one?
I played a lot, right from swimming, bodybuilding, football, most
Nice.
of the things.
I have an athlete father here. So, I like to think of coding as just like any other pursuit. Literally, coding is a language. It's a hobby. It's like swimming. So take swimming as an example. Do you have to be a swimmer to swim? Do you have to be trained in swimming? Do you have to be a professional swimmer to swim? Probably not. Take any sport. You have to build a muscle memory. That's what you have to do. You have to build a muscle memory, and that's best done from an early age. So if your body knows what is a freestyle stroke, a backstroke, breaststroke, whatever, if you can learn that, you don't have to be an Olympic swimmer. You don't have to be a trained swimmer. As long as you swim, you will know how to swim. And I think the same goes for any cognitive skill, like languages. So I don't know what languages you speak. In my life, I've learned to speak Spanish, French, etc., growing up in the US. And I have found that you can speak these languages without going through any formal training in that language. You can download an app to learn it. You can use Duolingo. You can use, back in that day, there was Rosetta Stone. There are many ways to learn a skill. So what happens when you move from subjects to skills is that no one can tell you you can or cannot. You can acquire that skill even when the world doesn't let you acquire that skill. That's the beauty of the world we live in today. And today you have things like CamKitWell, which are trying to democratize the access to that skill. So that anyone can get access to good teachers in that. I think that anyone can do coding. And I think the beauty of coding is that it is a language that you can learn to speak, even if you don't want to be a computer science guy, even if you don't want to be a coder, even if you don't want to be someone who just codes all day, because what you're fundamentally learning is a language that lets you speak technology and understand technology, to talk to devices and systems in the world. I like to look at coding as a language and as a skill, not as a subject. It's not a subject, which is why when parents, when they come to CamKitWell, and for parents who are here right now listening to me, coding is not a subject that you have to get a certification in. So you will inevitably ask us, hey, can we get my child's certificate? And we'll give it to you. But honestly, we give you the certificate only because you asked for it. No one else in the world is going to ask you for it. MIT does not ask you for certificates. Am I right, Sinchan? Did you have to show your certificates? No, right? Nope. We live in a world that thinks for some crazy reason that get a certification in this, get a certification in that. But the best institutions in the space are not going to ask you for your certificate. What they're going to ask you is show me what you do. Show me what you've done. And they're not going to ask you, did you study this or that? Which branch did you take? Which exams did you take? It's about what you can do and the skills that you have. And in Sinchan's case, I think that he demonstrated he's a doer. A doer is someone who does. In 10th grade, 1 year after he learned coding, when most other people were probably playing games, he was making games, and then he was making applications that helped people. That helped people with cerebral palsy do better with hand-eye coordination. Difficult engineering problem to solve. He didn't know the answer to it. He said he didn't know the final answer. He knew the first step, and he took the first step. That is what I think institutions recognize. And that is where I really wanted Sinchan to be part of this as a guest and to speak to you, because I think his story just embodies that so well. In a world which makes it so hard for you to get into these colleges, I think he did that in a way by doing something he loves. rather than following the checklist. And I think that's the takeaway here. So Sinchan, can you summarize by just leaving leaving your final thoughts as advice for parents and kids, and then we can close this out and let people go on to their Sunday lives, and let you go back to sleep since it is way past midnight now, your time in New York.
Yeah, no worries at all. Yeah, I'd say in terms of final advice, I think we touched upon a lot of good topics, especially this last one I liked a lot. Coding is language like swimming. You know, I guess not even everyone swims, right? But even think of it as walking nowadays, right? Before it was like swimming, like, oh, some people swim, but now everyone has to do it. And I think there's something really amazing about it. It's not just like, oh, I had to learn this hard subject. You get to build something and you get to see it come to life. And being able to do that for anything, it doesn't have to be someone else's problem. It could be your problem. It could be that, oh, okay, I have to do this every day. Why do I have to do it? And I do it using some code. Let's write a program to do it. You know, these things are, it's empowerment at its best. And I think now is the time when these kids can really do that in a way like never before. Even when we were first learning how to code, it was way harder. You know, I said I Googled, but it took a lot of effort. Now, you know, you can go to Camp K-12, you can go to a lot of different resources to learn these things and have that foundation so that whatever you do in the future, whether it's, you know, swimming or engineering, whatever it is, you have that power to go build something, to solve any problem. You know, the key difference, I'd say, in computer science, we learned about, you know, theoretical computer science, the people who discovered computers. And one of the biggest things they did was that they jumped from a calculator to a computer. A calculator can only do a set of things, you know, plus, minus, multiply. But a computer is a universal computing machine. It can do anything in the world, any kind of computation. And that was amazing, and it's changed our world. And I think it's going to continue to do so. And the only people who can do so is you guys. You guys, especially in India, there's a world of new applications, new developers coming out every day. And this is the right time. If you guys can start building things to solve your own problems, your family's problems, the world's problems, you will not only have a great time, but yeah, maybe you'll become the next Bill Gates out there.
Thank you, Sinchan. Yeah. And the summary there is, you're not too young to start. Parents who are here listening, one of the best things you can do as parents is challenge your son or daughter with a problem that maybe they don't know how to solve, you yourself don't know how to solve, it doesn't even matter. Plant the seed in their mind and say, hey, you're learning coding. Here's a problem that I have in my business. Here's a problem that I have. It could be a family website even. It could be like a fun type of problem. Family website is a good one. Or, you know, we have New Year's coming up. New Year's Eve greeting card is a fun problem. Make one for the family that we can send to everyone. Now, we do that at Camp K-12. We already do that. But what you can do is take that further. You can make it so that even in their life with you and in their life with relatives and all of that, you are giving them exciting problems to solve. And they may not know the full journey, but as Sinchan said, all they need to know is the first step. And then the rest kind of takes care of itself. Sinchan, thank you for the inspiring words and the story that you shared with us. Congratulations to everything that you have achieved, and kudos to you on, after doing what you've done, still coming back and building your own ventures. We didn't talk so much about what you're building today. He's building a very exciting company and product in the AI space. It's very technical in nature, which is why we didn't go into depth about it. But here's an example of someone who's worked at those companies, but ultimately chose to make a difference. He did that when he started coding. He's doing that today. It's come full circle, and we wish him the best of luck on his journey as well. So thank you, Sinchan, and everyone, another round of applause for our guest.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, see you guys next month for the next speaker.
Thank you, Sinchan. It was a great enlightening session for the kids. Thanks, Anshul. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me. Thank you so much.